Imagine walking through the rubble of a German city in the spring of 1945. The air still smells like smoke and wet plaster. Entire streets have collapsed into themselves, and there are no roads left, only the memory of where roads used to be. And then you hear it, a low, grinding roar cutting through the silence of a dead city. A machine the size of a small house rolls forward on steel tracks, pushing a mountain of broken concrete out of its path like it weighs nothing. On its side, barely visible under mud and scorch marks, is a stenciled number and a faded star. This is a Caterpillar D7. It survived Normandy. It survived the Rhine. Now it has one more job, making room for a world that has to start over. These machines were never meant to be famous. They carried no weapons, fired no shells, earned no medals. But without them, the liberation of Europe does not happen, and the rebuilding of Europe does not happen either. The war was over, but a new mystery was just beginning. What really happened to the armored bulldozers of World War II after the guns fell silent? To understand why this matters, you have to understand what these machines actually did. The armored bulldozer was a British invention, born out of a brutal lesson from the failed raid on Dieppe in 1942. Engineers needed a way to clear beach obstacles, fill craters, and cut roads through devastated terrain, all while under fire. The answer was simple and brilliant. Take a standard Caterpillar D7 tractor, wrap the engine and driver's cab in armor plate, and send it in with the first wave. By D-Day, June 6, 1944, these machines were landing on the beaches of Normandy alongside the infantry. In this rare footage from the invasion, we see armored dozers clearing paths through minefields and beach defenses while men fall around them. By the war's end, thousands of these machines, D7S and their larger cousins, the D8S, were scattered across the European theatre. Historians estimate that more than 6,000 tracked bulldozers, both armoured combat models and their unarmoured construction cousins, were in Allied hands in Europe by May 1945. They were used by the US Army Corps of Engineers, the British Royal Engineers, and the Seabees of the US Navy. These were not glamorous machines, but they were among the most valuable pieces of equipment in the entire Allied arsenal, because after the shooting stopped, the real work was just beginning. Picture the days right after VE Day. Millions of Germans are homeless, bridges are down, railways are twisted metal, entire cities like Cologne, Dresden, and Berlin are seas of broken stone. The bulldozers did not stop working. If anything, their workload multiplied overnight. In the first weeks after surrender, Allied engineering units repurposed their machines almost immediately from military tools into instruments of survival. Roads had to be cleared so food convoys could reach starving civilians. Bridges had to be leveled and rebuilt so occupying forces could move. Concentration camps, horrifically, needed bulldozers too, to dig mass graves for the dead in places like Bergen-Belsen, a task that haunted the operators who performed it for the rest of their lives. There was no time for ceremony. A machine that had been clearing landmines on Tuesday might be flattening a bombed apartment block by Friday. Meanwhile, something else was happening quietly in the background. As Allied forces swept through Germany, they were also seizing German-owned construction equipment, tractors, and engineering vehicles found in factories, railway yards, and Wehrmacht supply depots. This equipment was folded into the massive reconstruction effort as well, operated now by German civilian labor gangs under Allied supervision. The machines that had once served the Reich's war effort were now being used to clear away the wreckage that war effort had caused. Nothing was wasted. Not yet. Not every machine survived the transition to peace. As demobilization accelerated through 1946, the US and British militaries faced a strange logistical problem. They had far more heavy equipment in Europe than they could justify shipping home, and far more than a shrinking peacetime army actually needed. In military scrapyards across occupied Germany and France, rows of surplus vehicles, jeeps, half-tracks, trucks, and yes, bulldozers sat waiting for a decision. Some were simply too worn out. Years of combat use had cracked engine blocks, warped frames, and stripped tracks down to bare metal. These machines were cut apart, crushed, and sold for scrap steel, feeding directly into the post-war iron and steel industries of Britain, France, and a slowly recovering Germany. Imagine a scrapyard outside Antwerp in 1946. Cranes lift the rusted hulks of armor plate that once shielded operators from German gunfire. The same steel that survived the Atlantic Wall is melted down and poured into girders for new apartment blocks. It is a strange kind of resurrection. The machines died so that buildings could rise. But scrapping was never the main story. It was far too expensive and wasteful to destroy a functioning bulldozer when Europe desperately needed heavy equipment. Instead, thousands of surviving machines were funneled directly into reconstruction programs. The US military transferred surplus construction equipment to civil authorities across occupied Germany, Austria, and Italy, where it was used to clear rubble, rebuild roads, and restore railway lines. Many machines were also sold or leased to private construction firms that sprang up almost overnight to handle the sheer scale of the rebuilding. This process accelerated dramatically after 1948, when the Marshall Plan began pouring American money and machinery into European recovery. Bulldozers that had once cleared beachheads were now clearing land for new factories, new highways, and new housing developments. Some were stripped of their military armor plating entirely, converted back into standard civilian construction tractors, and simply absorbed into the post-war economy without a trace of their combat history left visible. A few machines took stranger paths. Some were shipped to occupied Japan to assist in reconstruction there. Others were sold as military surplus to private contractors in South America and the Middle East, where they continued working well into the 1960s on projects that had nothing to do with the war that built them. Most of these machines simply vanished into obscurity, worked until they broke down, and were quietly discarded. But a handful survived in stranger, more remarkable ways. One of the most famous surviving armored D7 bulldozers spent decades not in a museum, but on a working farm in the English countryside. Its armor plate, prized by the farmer for its sheer toughness, was stripped off and repurposed as weir plating on ploughing equipment. The bulldozer itself, unrecognized for what it truly was, kept working fields for nearly 40 years before collectors identified its wartime chassis number and painstakingly restored it to its original D-Day configuration. Another surviving machine turned up decades later at a military vehicle show in the United Kingdom, brought forward by the son of a Royal Engineers sapper who had operated it on Juno Beach in June 1944. The family had kept fading photographs of the machine in action, crumpled and creased from being carried for decades, proof that this exact bulldozer had been there on the day it mattered most. These survivors are rare precisely because nobody thought to save them. They were tools, not trophies. Nobody in 1945 imagined that a farmer would one day realize the scrap metal reinforcing his plow blade had once helped liberate Europe. Here are a few details that rarely make it into the history books. Some of these machines were quietly repurposed for atomic testing support in the late 1940s and early 1950s. Heavy construction equipment, including surplus wartime bulldozers, was used to build infrastructure at remote nuclear test sites in Nevada and the Pacific, machines that had once cleared minefields now grading roads for the atomic age. In a strange twist of history, some German-operated tractors and heavy equipment seized by the Allies in 1945 later resurfaced in the hands of both East and West German construction firms during the 1950s, quietly rebuilding the very cities their earlier operators had helped destroy. The equipment had no politics. It simply worked for whoever needed it next. And perhaps strangest of all, several armored bulldozers that survived the war were discovered decades later, abandoned in remote corners of former military bases, buried under decades of soil and vegetation, essentially forgotten by the militaries that once depended on them. Recovery teams and collectors in the 1980s and 1990s occasionally stumbled onto these machines completely by accident, mistaking rusted armor plate for scrap debris until someone noticed the unmistakable shape of a wartime dozer blade underneath. Today, only a small number of genuine armored bulldozers from the Second World War survive in verified, documented condition. A handful sit in military museums in the United Kingdom and the United States, restored and painted in their original olive drab, blades scarred with dents that collectors believe date back to the beaches of Normandy itself. A few more remain in private hands, owned by military vehicle enthusiasts who spend years and small fortunes tracking down original parts, engines, and armor plating to bring these machines back to something close to their wartime condition. The rest are gone, melted into steel girders, buried under decades of farmland, broken down piece by piece until nothing recognizable remained. There is something quietly profound about that fact. These machines never fired a shot, yet they were present for two of the 20th century's most defining moments: the invasion that freed a continent and the reconstruction that rebuilt it from ash. They cleared the way for liberation, and then they cleared the way for peace. In the end, that may be the most fitting legacy any machine of war could ever have. Not destruction, but rebuilding. Not an ending, but a foundation for everything that came after.